I'm Tom Whitehead, and I am retired from Northwestern, but I'm still around up here. And I knew Clementine Hunter really well. Um, my most memorable experience was the first trip to Clementine's. I was a sophomore at Northwestern in 1965, and I had a student worker job working with Oral Williams, who was an English teacher, and the English teacher, and she was a friend of Clementine and Francoise. And she asked me one day, I worked with her in the TV studio. She was doing some testing of teaching with closed circuit television. And she needed somebody to help with the graphics. We didn't have all this you had to put a piece of paper in the wall and on an easel before she talked about it. And I could keep up with her more or less. And I did that. And one afternoon she said, would you like to go out and meet Clementine Hunter? And I said yes. And we went out in the country. It was on a Tuesday afternoon. We went to Clementine's first, and we went to Melrose. And that was the first time I met Francois Mignon that time. And that's the first time I ever met Clementine Hunter. When I was my undergraduate years at Northwestern, I went by there a couple more times, 2 or 3 times. I bought, in my undergraduate years here, 3 paintings. The first painting was $5. One was a smaller one, it was $3. And I bought a big one for $10. And then I went off to Boston for graduate school, and I came back to Northwestern in July of 1969 and joined the faculty. And when I did that, I don't know what happened, but I started going to Melrose more or less once a week, at least once a week. And I got involved with a cast of characters here from Natchitoches. There were 2 other ladies in town very interested in Clementine. One was Ann Britton, her son is here today, and the other was Mildred Bailey or Dee Dee Bailey. And the 3 of us, the rest of Clementine's life, I mean, we didn't involve managing her or anything, but we sort of represented her interest. There were some little licensing deals, greeting cards. She got money every 3 months. Ann Britton did the business part. Dee Dee Bailey did the academic part, writing and things, and I did the media part of it. People coming wanting to go interview her, they would call me, and I'd get her out there and try to get her to talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. It was a memorable experience. And then over time, everybody else has passed away, and I have ended up as the last man standing in that group of people that were friends with Clementine in the 1960s and 70s. And you know, she died on January the 1st, 1988, at the age of 101. And she was actually painting until November of 1987. That's remarkable to be painting when you're 100 years old. And the paintings are fun. She was having trouble then with vision, I believe. And I have some of my favorite paintings are ones that were done then. My absolute favorite one is she was doing a horse pulling a wagon of cotton. And she got confused and put the wheels on the horse. But and the wagon is just floating in the air back there. But that was the last painting I got from her, and that was sort of a special one. What I'd like to do today, and the theme of the folk festival here, is talk about Clementine as a person who documented folk life on Clementine Hunter and on Melrose Plantation and Cane River. I have the button to begin. Okay. I had to punch it this way. Okay. The artist captured scenes of work, play, and religion for 100 years on Cane River. We know our first documentation of her painting a picture, we actually know the date. It's December the 19th, 1939. Francois Mignon had come down from New York, and that's another whole story. And he made a comment in the journal. He kept a journal. And there are over 15,000 pages of journal that Francois, he was going blind, and he typed. And there are 15,000 typed pages of journal. They're archived at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And that's another story. However, we have been successful between LSU and Northwestern back in the 1980s. We had them microfilmed. And just last year, through the generosity of the Northwestern State University Foundation, we have had them digitized. You can go online at the Northwestern website and you can read the journals of Francois Mignon. Now, they're all typed though, which makes it easier to read. And you also, I warn you now, and you be careful, because Francois oftentimes did not let facts get in the way of a good story. So you have to assume that if you said it's raining today, it's raining today. But if there are other comments on there, you sometimes wonder about the exact accuracy. But he writes on December the 19th, 1939, the Negress wash lady says she paints pictures. And he wrote me his own person. Told her to bring me one. I want to look at it. And the next day she comes with a painting. And Francois describes that painting in the journal. We know where that painting is. It's at Louisiana State Library in Baton Rouge. Lyle Saxon ended up with the painting in New Orleans, and he gave it to Essie Mae Culver, who was a state librarian. And when she retired, she left it, and she put a note on the back of it that said this is the first painting Clementine Hunter did, and it's in the archives at the Louisiana State Library. But then for the rest of Francois's tenure at Melrose, till they closed the plantation, you really see the documentation of Clementine's work. He talks about the murals, when they did the African House murals. And it's really an interesting perspective with his writing about what she was painting. I've divided up my talk today into four sort of general areas, just to make it categorizing purposes. One was scenes of religion. And of course, you recognize the black Jesus on the cross. But the one on the right is very interesting and special. Her last son came home from California and died in 1976. His name was Frenchie. And the next week I went out there and she had this painting. I said, "What is this?" She says, "That's Frenchie going to heaven." And that's Frenchie rising up out of the grave, and you can see heaven is getting ready for him with the black circle. You know, there's a real an inner feeling documented by an artist who could not read nor write, and it's Frenchie going to heaven. This is the very first painting I ever purchased. I paid, she charged me $5 for this one. I bought two that day, and the other one was $3. It was smaller. And this is a funeral scene on Melrose, taking the casket down to the grave down here. Religious scenes, there's the first christening, except it gets all confused. That was probably a first communion, but she called it the baptizing of the baby. So she got religion mixed up out there. She was both Baptist and during her life, and she was Catholic. So the stories all get kind of gumbled, but what difference it makes? It's religion. And here's a wedding. This is an early wedding. This was from the early 1960s. Look at the one comment people make about her work is the bride. She's always the largest person in the painting. There's this theory of Clementine's that she always painted the most important person or object the largest. And you can see here the smallest character in this one is the preacher. And right below the groom. And the wedding was a festive occasion, and Clementine captured it in these paintings much better than a person writing about it. You can tell a lot about a wedding in Clementine's perspective. And then I go to scenes of work. This is, of course, probably her most traditional painting as a version of cotton picking. And you notice here there's something that some of you people more my age, I vaguely remembered seeing this once or twice. I used to drive on Highway 1 from up to Alexandria and up to Natchitoches from Baton Rouge on Louisiana 71, the one that went through Marksville. And I saw one time people had fence around the cotton field, and they kept geese in the cotton field. Geese ate grass. It's before they had all of this chemicals, pesticides, and spraying. The natural enemy of weeds were geese. And Clementine painted what she had seen at Melrose, where they kept geese in the fields. And so that's an interesting painting. She's telling a historical perspective that no longer exists today. Nobody understands why they had geese in the cotton fields. This looks like sugarcane and gourds. Scenes of work. Notice the horse, the wheels. This is a little small, narrow one. It is carrying the wagon of cotton to the cotton gin. And at that time, each plantation had their own gin, and there's a scene of cotton ginning. No longer do they do that on any of the ones around here. They all have a central gin they go to. Pecan picking, 'tis the season. And I have in my pictures, I don't have it on this because I didn't have time to show it. But nowadays, I was at Melrose last fall. I took a picture. There was one tractor with his thing on the end of it on an arm shaking the tree limb, and there was another tractor pulling a sweeper pulling up the pecans. If two men did what a whole bunch of people did here. And the story that Clementine told about the pecan picking was on Sundays, the plantation owner let the people that worked there pick pecans. Whatever they kept, whatever they picked, they could keep or they could sell. So that was Sunday. It was obviously a Sunday afternoon. And this is a side here. I loaned this painting to a museum in Minneapolis for an exhibit. And I shipped it up there and all this. And I get a horrible phone call. They were just in horror. I said, what is wrong? She said, is that boy being hanged? It looks like he's hanging. And I said, no, the kids climbed up in the pecan tree to shake the limbs. So you see, this cultural aspect of life has disappeared so many places. Nobody knows what it is. And that's one of the things about Clementine. Besides being an artist, she's a documenter of history. She's telling historical stories. I end with this one on the cotton part. I'm going to some others. But look what happened. This is one, the Clementine painting, I've only ever seen one cotton picking machine. And when the cotton picking machine came, that was the end of plantation life in many ways because the jobs were all gone. This is when the migration occurred north in the late 40s, particularly early 1950s. The people that worked on the plantation moved north for jobs and industries. Also, this is when Melrose, lost all the people that lived there. They all left because there was no more jobs picking cotton. These are some scenes of recreation. They're going fishing. The ladies going fishing. They are fishing. And then there's a fish fry. She aspects three of the cultural aspects of fishing. Think about that. They're going fishing, they're fishing, and the fish fry. They bring together a story from that perspective of a person who probably did this on a Sunday or a Saturday afternoon when they weren't working. I love the fact that the chimney goes up through the tree. She didn't know quite how to put the chimney in front of the tree, so instead she just had it come up the back of the tree. There's some creative endeavors oftentimes. Saturday night at the Honky Tonk, and those of you from the Cane River area know this building still exists. It's been abandoned a long time. It was called the Friendly Place, and it's on the side opposite of Melrose. And there's a window fan in the building, and that's the window fan showing in the painting. There's two doors and a window fan. That building is still out there. And there's fighting and dancing and shooting, all kind of activities going at Saturday night at the Honky Tonk. If you really wanted to get into cultural studies, Clementine is showing something else here too. Out there, if those that know Melrose, there was a black bar and a Creole bar. There was Bubba's, it was spelled Bubba, but they called it Bubba's. That was the Creole instant bar, and the one across the river was the friendly place. There was a dichotomy, a difference in the Creole and black culture. Birthday parties, this was a colorful one here. There are all kind of activities. It looks like the lady behind the table with the cake doesn't have any legs, but little details like that we don't worry about too much. She's standing on something or something, I don't know. This is a fish fry, and notice how she does a really good job of showing all the different involvements. Look, there's the guy cleaning the fish, here's the guy making the fire, and there's the Lord. That could possibly maybe be a hog killing too. Sometimes the hog killing and the fish fry look alike. They could be killing the hog and then filing the fire, and she's doing the meat for the pork, killing the hog. A couchon de lait, or they call it something else on Cane River, I think. But Clementine painted activities that she knew. And think about this with me for a moment, is that very few of these people that lived this life had no access to cameras. They didn't paint. So Clementine's paintings are an insider's perspective. She painted it the way the people that did it was not an outsider filming it or taking pictures or writing about it. She did it from the insider's perspective. And that's the lights, please, somebody, wherever the lights are. I just wanted to do that because I wanted to show you her role as a documenter, as a folk artist. Yes, she painted scenes that we're all familiar with, cotton pickings and funerals and wakes and all of that. But she did it from that insider's perspective. And the people that visited Melrose, some of the great American photographers, Marion Post and others visited Melrose over the years. but their pictures of life at Melrose are not like pictures of Clementine painted of life at Melrose. So you see a real, between the cultures, the white culture documenting it and the black culture living it in her works. So, and there were very few people there were other folk artists that did it, but Clementine's whole life was on that plantation, and it pretty well tells the Melrose story. In addition to that, you can go to Francois's journal then and read all these stories he writes about this taking place. And I urge you to try the journal. They're online, they're free at Northwestern. The easiest way you can go through the Northwestern website, but you can also go, it's easy to remember, NSU Traditions. And it's .com, nsutraditions.com. And you go there, and there's a link. You go down to the bottom of the page, and there are other publications like that. But the Francois Mignon journals, or just go sit down one day and read a couple pages. You get engrossed in what all he's writing about, whether it particularly pertains to anybody or not. But it's gossip about what all's going on out there. And you see a lot about the routine of plantation life. Every morning at 9:30, there was buttermilk served and coffee. Am I correct? Yes. Buttermilk and coffee is served. And then there was lunch. The lunch was a big meal of the day unless they had company come in because people were working. And then the evening, there's something at 3:30 or there's coffee or something in the afternoons. You get several things. You get a life from the insider's perspective, but you also get Clementine painting it. I wanted to give some time here, first of all, to get back on schedule, but also I would like to know if we have any questions. Sometimes the questions are much better than what I say because you ask questions that stirs up new thoughts and activities. Yes, please.
Yeah, and I will preface this by saying I walked in about 15 minutes ago, so pardon.
Okay.
Covered it. But with your interactions with Ms. Hunter,
really?
We talked some about her folk style of painting and how some pieces of it might be like, oh, the woman's legs you don't see in the picture or something. But with your interactions with her, did you ever get any insight into what she might think, oh, I messed up on this painting, I need to discard it, this isn't very good, so I'm going to throw this away? What would chalk up in her mind as something not good enough to finish?
Well, she finished every one. Sometimes she would attempt to work on one, repair one, or change things. That always didn't work out well. Because Clementine had a board, a piece of plywood, she squirted paint out of the tube. She mixed her own paints. If she wanted a light blue, she could put some white and blue. She never could duplicate a color. So if she had a lady wearing a dress and she left out part of it, if she tried to fix it, it wouldn't match. And that became an indication. I saw one painting that it was a cotton picket and it had a sky in it. And the person somehow or another had scraped the sky and it lost the paint off of it. And they brought it out to Clementine to repair. I was there that day when she came to pick it up. And Clementine had just taken some blue paint and painted it across the board. She made no effort to match it. So, it was all in her mind, but she did occasionally would fix things, but she never discarded a painting. She would work on it. But she also, I guess I should mention this if you didn't know it, she always took a pencil and drew the painting first. And she called it marking it. And I'm not getting off in the forgery business. There's been a huge federal investigation of people forged. 3 people went to jail or were convicted. One of the things that the forger never did in his work was he never painted, he never drew an outline with a pencil. And of course the FBI can see through paint or around it, and they could see pencil marks in the original ones and they could not see any pencil marks in the fake ones. She always marked the board first. And oftentimes today you can see paintings to where, it's outside the lines and stuff. You can see it. Toward the end of her life, she was less detailed. And by the way, we've had some guests join us here. Some of Clementine's relatives at Grant. There is a granddaughter back there that I knew. Yes, granddaughter. We remember her at Melrose. And then her 2 daughters, and then their kids up front. Granddaughters.
Her daughter, I'm her daughter.
Yes.
And that's the
Brother's daughter, 2 great-granddaughters of Clementine. And this is a great-grandson. Yes, okay. Look how much she lived to be 100 years old. She lived to be 100 years old. You would think that there would be. She was born. We have documentation. Back then, there were traveling priests, itinerant priests. They only came to the church, we think it was once every 3 months, and they did weddings and baptisms. And that priest did it in 1879. No, 18. Arthur, help me. We'll come up with it in a minute. She was 101 in 1988, so it was been 1887 she was christened. And it's at the church. Right? We found the record. And it was all in Latin. That made scholars for trouble. We had trouble finding it for a while because it was in Latin. And she was christened as Clementine or something. It wasn't Clemence. And it was hard to read that. And she lived down the river below Melrose at a plantation, Hidden Hill. And then when she was like around the turn of the last century, 1900, the family moved to Melrose. Her father became a sharecropper there, and where he became a sharecropper. Yeah, no, he was a sharecropper at Little Eva. That means he got a percentage of the profit. If there were no profits, he didn't get any money. So he moved to Melrose and became a laborer. He worked and got paid a salary. And she spent the rest of her life around Melrose Plantation from 1900 to 1988. We think she said she traveled to Shreveport and Alexandria. And there's some people believe she may have gone to Houston once, but we don't know that to be a fact. But think about that. I get emotional sometimes, but think about that. She never left this basic Cane River area. And now, go ahead, Jack.
Would you please tell us the story about President Jimmy Carter?
I'll tell that. I will. And think about this. There was an exhibit in the Louvre in Paris a couple of years ago that had some of her paintings in it. There is going to be I don't know what you call it, a mini exhibition at the New Smithsonian African American this fall with Clementine's work. And there are some other, I can't talk about this very much, but there's some other major American museums that are planning Clementine shows in the next 5 years. Because they see in Clementine's work, it's a storytelling. Clementine was a storyteller. She told everything she painted was something she experienced or believed in the religious scenes and stuff. Her religious beliefs were demonstrated in her paintings. She was very, I don't like to use the word necessarily pure, but she was pure. Her experiences were limited. She had very little contact with what we would call the outside world. When television came, she did watch television. And I was only out there in the afternoons, but she would sit there and watch the old reruns of the Beverly Hillbillies because she identified with the Granny character. I was always just fascinated watching the Beverly Hillbillies. Jack Jr. is mentioning here an episode. Jimmy Carter, the Britons were close, big Democrats, and they were friends with Jimmy Carter when he was in the White House. And they had that Washington Mardi Gras every year. And the president said, invite Clementine to come up and we'll have her at the White House. So they extended the invitation that President Carter would like for her to come to Washington. And she said, if he wants to see me, he can come here. And that was end of story. That was the end of the story. There was no more story to tell. And you get me strung off. I don't want to get strung off here. But I took Joan Rivers, the comedian, out there. That's another story. And Joan Rivers got out there and started cracking jokes, and Clementine just looked at her, and she shut up and sat down in a chair and was quiet. I have so many wonderful stories about taking people to Clementine's and stuff. It's very rich. But her paintings, regardless of what I say here today, her paintings are going to survive the test of time. When the history of American art is written, Clementine Hunter will be one of those chapters because she was unique and she painted she painted from 1939 to 1987. And her span of time, she shows the jobs the plantation lost. When she left Melrose, there was nothing there. There was just a few people working there. So Clementine is a historian, and she's a folk artist, but she was also a true person. A person, if any of you, I know Jack Jr. knew her, and there are some other people here in the room that knew her. And of course the family knew her. Dolores, do you want to say anything or any just about memories of her? She was real, though. That's the best thing about it. She didn't put on or anything. Go ahead, please.
I just wanted to ask, when you said she left Melrose.
Yes. In 1977, they had sold the plantation. And there was a flood. Every once in a while, the river backs up, the Cane River backed up, and it went under her house. And she didn't like that at all. And she knew that they had sold Melrose, and she didn't know what they were. She lived on a house on Melrose property. And so her daughter Jackie was living up the road in a house trailer. Oh no, in a wooden house. She rented a house, and Clementine bought a trailer and moved the trailer up to the house. She didn't want to anybody living with her, but she wanted to live by one of the family there next door. So she lived there, and then they moved. I don't know what happened down there, but they moved up to property. The Britons had a camp on Cane River. And so Clementine wanted to know, could she move the trailer there? Well, yes, it could. And they put in a sewer system. It was septic tank. Then she had to have a place for Jackie to live next door. Jackie moved in the camp house they had. And then Clementine decided before she passed away that she had wanted to own a piece of property. So she bought a piece of property in Natchez, Louisiana, where they live today. Dolores lives on that piece of property. And moved her house trailer. That poor house trailer got moved twice, from 1, 2, 3. And so she lived the rest of her life there, and she died She died in Natchitoches Hospital on January the 1st of 1988 at the age of 101. That's pretty remarkable. And she was painting up until about a month before she died. Anybody got any more questions, please?
Is there any significance in the changing of her signature on the painting?
Yes, it's evolutionary. I can look at a painting and tell you within 5, 10 years, depending on the signature, when she painted it. Just real quickly, when she first started painting pictures, she didn't put anything on it. She actually didn't know how to read or write. So,
did she ever learn to read or write?
Not really.
Okay.
She, then they got Francois Mignon, who was the writer there, and there was also, he had a sidekick of sorts. And James Register was working and living up in Oklahoma, and Register was involved and got some help from the Rosenwald Foundation in Chicago. They had given a lot of money to building black schools in the South. Well, Register had written a book about Southern dialect, and they had gotten some money from the Rosenwald Foundation to write the book. Well, Register got the Rosenwald people interested in Clementine's work. He thought that they should give her a grant. Well, they actually didn't give her a grant. The man who was the director sent her $150 or something to buy paint, and that became, in James Register and Francois' storytelling, became a grant from the Rosenwald Foundation. And they told her, they had some people on the committee that advised her, and they advised Register that she really needed to figure out how to sign her paintings. Because if she didn't sign her paintings, nobody was going to know who painted it. Well, initially, Register and Francois decided that was going to be too much work to figure out how to sign pictures. So Register created a signature that was Clemence. That's what they call Clementine, C-L-E-M-E-N-C-E. So Register signed Clemence on a lot of the pictures. Actually, Clementine painted them at Melrose. They were on paper. He mailed them to Norman, Oklahoma, where Register was living, and Register would put Clemence on them. They were all on paper. There's some of the highly desirable, beautiful pictures. She was not painting the scenes over like she was toward the end. She painted different things. And those paintings were called the Norman paintings that they did, the Clemence era. Then Francois finally convinced her she needed to learn how to sign her pictures, real paintings, the big paintings. Register couldn't, he was in Oklahoma, he couldn't sign Clemence. So with some effort, Francois taught her how, I don't know if somebody taught her how to make CH. And she did that for 4 or 5 years. Most if you see a real CH, it was done late 40s, early 50s. Then Clementine on her own decided to flip the C backwards. And the reason she told me and told us was that she didn't want anybody to think that Miss Cammie had done it. Miss Cammie Henry initial thing CH, Cammie Henry. So Clementine decided to reverse the C. And then the initial signature reversed CH. The C was not touching the H at all. There were separate letters. Then over the time of her life, and that's where you see a time frame evolution, the C got over the H, and by the time she died, the H was completely inside the C. Now, every once in a while, that rule would not work, but most of the time it worked. And we can probably look at one and date it now within 5 years, maybe 10. We can tell when she did it, more or less for sure. And so you can date the paintings that way. Anybody else? Yes, please.
During the time she was at Melrose, there were people coming and going. Was there any substantive interaction with the other artists who were there, learn anything from her? Did she learn anything from them?
We know that Clementine knew Alberta Kinsey, a New Orleans artist that was a rather well-known female artist in New Orleans. And the story that Alberta Kinsey told, whether it's true or not, was that Clementine would come in the cabin where she was working and painting, one of the little cabins at Melrose, and Alberta would say to Clementine, you know, what do you think about this or whatever? And Clementine might make some comment, and Alberta often said, this is an story, a Francois story, that Alberta would make that Clementine would make a suggestion, and Alberta did it, and the painting was better. I don't know, but that was a Francois. You have to remember Francois stories. Anytime you credit Francois with the story, you have to be a little careful. And Clementine and Francois did a cookbook. Supposedly, Clementine dictated the recipe to Francois. The recipes are like take one whole armadillo, I don't know what all was in it, coon or something. It was hard to figure out, you know, measurements and proportions. But there is a cookbook that Francois and Clementine did. It was a magic time at Melrose. Up until Cammy died in 1948, so it was in its full glory to 1948. Then, after that, Francois stayed there till 1970. But the Henry family, none of them lived on the property, but they had a cook there that they ate lunch there. They were working out there. So they fed Francois that way. And Clementine was around all the time. She was still cooking some, but, you know, she was getting up in years. And she was around and helped with the plantation. But she was painting then on. And she had this is the last story. And but she was on the public assistance. And they knew she was painting. And they finally told her she absolutely had to keep records of how many paintings she sold, to see if she was eligible. And finally she decided she'd rather not be on the public assistance and keep records. So she also didn't particularly understand income tax, which was wonderful too. She was a fun person. How many people knew her? Anybody besides y'all? Of course, y'all knew her. Yeah, she was a magic person. Junior knew her, and she was fun. She could be a little cantankerous at times, but that was a part of the fun. Please.
Did you ever see her paint on anything other than canvas?
Oh yes, people started bringing her stuff to paint on. Jars, bottles, things. Somebody told me today they had a saw that she painted. But you have to look at it, because there were also, I'm not going into the forgery business, there were people forging her paintings back as early as the 1960s. And there became a big case in 2010. Some 3 people got convicted in federal court for forging her work. Go ahead.
Just to let you know, we're about out of time.
Okay, we're out of time. The timekeeper. Yes. Margaret.
I just wondered, did you mention that she made quilts? Well, she called them quilts, they're really not.
They're tapestries. She took pieces of fabric and sewed them together and made pictures. It's a picture quilt. Margaret has a baby picture quilt, and she's donated it to the Smithsonian African American. It's a part of their permanent collection now, or something. It's there. I don't know what the paperwork is. So yeah, she did, and those are some of the most collectible things in the world with a quilt. And she had a paper backing, and the backing, you can tell, they were made out of chops, horse feed or chops, whatever chops were, and the back of to give it texture, she would sew the fabric on chops bags cut open. There are people that have tried to do conservation work, it's a nightmare, trying to conserve fabric over feed sacks. Yeah, enough, time's up, bell rang. Thank y'all for coming.
Thank you.